Welcome back to the Curate for Women Network. I am Victoria Armstrong, your host, and today we are with the beautiful Miss Krystal Hardy Allen. Krystal is the author of What Goes Unspoken. Mm-hmm. She is also the CEO and founder of K. Allen Consulting, an education and business management consultant firm located in New Orleans, Louisiana, but they have a global reach.
Yeah.
This powerhouse at some point will absolutely be one of the most influential women in the world. Thank you, Krystal, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I admire you so much.
Krystal was also our workshop facilitator for the second annual Curate conference, where she has changed the lives of so many people, men and women who were in the room.
Thank you, sis.
You did an amazing job.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm sure you know that. I'm sure that you have gotten so much
A lot of feedback.
Yes.
A lot of feedback.
So many people have reached out to me like, how can I get with Miss Krystal, who did so great job? Kudos to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. That meant a lot.
Absolutely.
That meant a lot.
Yay.
I'm so happy to be here.
Krystal, how are you?
In this moment, I am good. I feel rested. Something that recently I haven't got enough of. I feel at peace inside. I feel content.
Yeah.
And grateful.
You wear so many hats.
A ton of hats.
So rest is, these days it feels like a luxury to take a nap. Yeah. Do you get many naps?
I'm normally really good about self-care and wellness and what it looks like and means for me. I have these moments in the course of the year, though, where my rest will be off. So I'm coming off of one of those moments where I was doing 50 million things, personal commitments and obligations, and also professional. And so this weekend, in particular, at this moment in time, I'm like, rest, relaxation.
Yes.
Thank you. You're here.
Yes. You are here in this beautiful home. Today we're at Chateau de Allen. And it is beautiful. I love your home.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here. Yeah. Okay, y'all, we're gonna jump right into it because last year, or it might have been almost 2 years ago, Ross and I had the opportunity to travel with you to Selma, Alabama.
They came, y'all.
We literally had to fly into Birmingham and then take a road trip into Selma because you were purchasing your parents a home and making them homeowners for the first time.
Yeah.
And it was a surprise.
It was a surprise. They have no idea that it's happening. They actually think that I have purchased an investment property, and they think that I am going to register it for the Section 8 program with our local housing authority. My father thinks he's won a bid to be the general contractor to make a few renovations inside, and my mom believes that she is the property manager.
And the home is beautiful.
Thank you.
Krystal, let's talk about that. Like, how did you even get to a place where you were like, there's a house, I want to buy it, I want to make my parents homeowners?
Yeah. My parents have always been very hardworking people. And at the same time, the way that, society operates from an economic standpoint is that by them being high school graduates, not having college education or degrees behind their names, they make less money for enormous amounts of hours that they actually work. And so they have worked for years to try to attain that goal with financial difficulty. And so for me, it looks like working as early as 16 years old in like the formal workforce. I worked at McDonald's as my very first job. Took pride in it, loved everything I learned in that space, and I have not stopped working a job since. So when I went to college at the University of Notre Dame as a first generation, college going student, I held down a work study, job at the same time as, being a college student. I saved.
Born hustler.
Yeah, like I've been always grinding and working, right? And not working, doing things I didn't enjoy, right? So I've always worked, but I've worked in settings that brought me pleasure and joy because I was helping someone else or making someone's life easier, right? Long story short, I've always used funds from any job I've had to provide financial support to my family for years. When I was a school principal, that was a moment in time where I told myself, I am going to work to ensure my mom works one job less, because she's always had multiple roles.
Well, where you get it from?
Yeah. And I was able to do that as a principal. I made enough income that I offset her not having to have multiple jobs so she could just work one. And shortly after I transitioned into entrepreneurship, and at that moment in time, I felt that freedom and liberation for them would look like becoming homeowners. And I didn't want them to have the financial burden from doing it. And so my transition from being a school principal into being a social entrepreneur meant that I also started a savings account. And I decided that I would save enough money over time to purchase a home in full for them.
So how did you know that you could do this? Like, where did you get this knowledge? Because you're from Selma. Like, we'll get into that, but where did you learn the skill to save and delegate and also, just kind of build this life where you are not only responsible for your household, but now the household of your parents?
Yeah. I think number one, I've always taken a lot of inspiration from Oprah as a philanthropist, especially. Yeah, I've always taken a lot of inspiration from Tyler Perry and his philanthropic efforts. The way that I have seen those two in particular seed money, time, and all forms of other blessings into other people has always given me the permission to think bigger than what I could see with my natural naked eye. And so for me, my go-to is, how much money am I going to send home or provide to my mom or my dad or whomever to help them with this moment or this bill or whatever. I think figures like that help me say, what would it look like to gift them with a whole home so that they don't have a mortgage to figure out or pay for? They don't have rent to pay for. They don't have any of these things. They don't even have to worry about getting it furnished, right? And that was another part of a surprise for them, that I completely furnished it too, right? And so I knew that would be life-changing and impactful, even more than some hundreds of dollars to help give temporary relief, right? And so that's where I really got the permission to say, what do you really want?
Yeah.
And I want a life for them without financial strain. And I want it to be a quality life, right? In which they feel they've never experienced, before, whatever that life entailed. So when my family, when they come to New Orleans to visit, right, they love our home. And several of our relatives feel that our home is a vacation home.
I mean, it kind of is. I think, like I told you earlier, I'm like, you need an elevator. You need an elevator in here. We can't just keep trekking up and down these stairs like that, girl.
Right. And so here's my thing, though. When I started looking, when I knew I had enough money in the account to begin looking for homes, right? And then I knew that I wanted to look for one in my hometown. I said, my parents, there's some things they love about this space.
Yes.
So I said, I want them to have their own version of this space.
Yes.
And I found a property that gave them space, right? It is 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, 4 bath, but it's also in a historic area of this historic city. And, they are the first African Americans to own that property. And that meant a lot to me. And so for context, November of 2022 is when Victoria and Ross journeyed with me to Alabama to check out this property on closing day when I got the keys, right? And I then hired my father, who is a self-trained carpenter.
Yes.
To do all of the renovation on this property. And he worked from November 2022 to January, flipping this home.
Yes.
He was super proud of what work he had done, right? He had no clue that the home he was renovating was going to be the home he was going to be gifted.
Yes.
And in January, around the time of my birthday, which is January 15th, I had intentions to surprise them with the home. Well, 3 days prior to this happening, a massive tornado hit the city of Selma and demolished many properties, including this property. Call my mom, get no answer at all. So my heart is like racing. I called my dad, I couldn't get an answer either. And minutes later, I send them a text message together to say, are y'all okay? My dad responds and says that a tornado has hit Selma. And I asked them, are y'all okay? And they said, we're good, we're safe. And the next message from my dad is that the house is gone. We spent then January of 2023 all the way into December of 2023 renovating to bring it back to life.
Yes.
And so it was very just impactful to see something literally being built or rebuilt from the ground up,
Yes.
you know, so to speak, for the areas that were most damaged. And to know that he did all of this by hand, right? And so I planned an open house, and I did it on Christmas Eve, which was a Sunday. I worked with a realtor. We had snacks set up. The realtor put out for sale signs in front of the home. We had a whole production, right? And so I had a photographer. The photographer was told to pretend that he was taking photos of the home.
Right.
So we could update the MLS photos online of the home for sale. My parents are not on online like that. So when they heard that story, they were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. People need to see accurate pictures of the house, right? And they're like, yeah, that's good. You got a photographer. You were thinking, girl. And so long story short, we then go to the balcony of the home, right? And I told them that I want to take a family photo. Just take a few minutes to do it of us in our first investment property together, right? I'm like, we're a team. So we get on the balcony and he takes the photo and I said, wait, okay, before we go back downstairs, here's the thing. I don't think this open house was really successful. My mom said, yeah, no one barely came. But it's okay, we're going to support you in anything you do. I was like, yeah, but here's the thing, like, I don't even want to sell it anymore. And she's like, what do you mean? You're just going to get I was like, well, here's the deal. I can't sell it. I also can't put anyone in the house because, and I take the keys out, right? And I say, these are your keys. This is your house. My mom was like, see, you play too much. And I was like, no, Ma, like, this is your house.
Really your house.
And at this point, I look at my dad and I say, you know, you've been working on this home for a whole year, and this has been your primary, like, project and work. And what you didn't know is every time you went to Lowe's or Home Depot and you asked me to pick out something, you know how you would tell me, I don't know what I want, and you never can make up your mind, and I always had you pick what you like? It was because I wanted y'all to pick the things that would go into your own home. And at that point, my mom started crying. Just, she couldn't control the tears. They couldn't stop. And my dad was just flabbergasted, you know, and he said, I've been working on my own house. And I said, yeah, you've been working on your own house, cute. Right? But they then, you know, just resolved and just shared that, like, and there's so many layers to what I'm about to say that connects to this book and why I believe diversity, equity, inclusion work is so important. You know, they said, people like us don't live in houses like these. And the layers of what they were speaking about is elitism and classism.
Yeah.
That, you know, are at play with them being a carpenter and a school bus driver.
Yeah.
And essentially a convenience store clerk. And also racial dynamics of them being Black, and then also they're just all of these layers, right?
Yeah.
And so, it did my heart so much good to know that they were getting blessed for something they prayed for years, and the blessing came through their own child, right? Like they raised me as a human, and I was able to open a door for
Your
them.
Your parents probably didn't even think that they were capable of raising a human being like you.
My mom had said something very similar to that recently. She said, I raised my blessing.
Yes. That is so beautiful. And so my knowing a little bit about your story, I know that you didn't start your career as an entrepreneur.
No.
Probably had no intentions of becoming an entrepreneur.
No.
And
Negative.
so when you were a kid, or as you were growing up, did you ever think that you would be in a position to purchase your parents a home?
So, interestingly enough, I've always had big dreams.
Yes.
Right? That I would write down in journals or in assignments at school. My parents used to say, yeah, that's just Krystal. My grandma's like, my grandbaby's going to do big things in life one day. I don't know how, but it's going to happen, right? And so I've always been considered a dreamer, and this home piece actually started when I was in third grade. So I actually wrote in an assignment at school that, the question was something similar to, something you want to do when you grow up. And I wrote a list of things, but one of the things on there is that I want to buy my mom and daddy a house. And I was 8 years old.
What gave you that thought? Was this around the time where Cribs was on TV and like we were watching MTV Cribs and people buying their parents' houses?
No, because we didn't really always have cable per se, but it was, for me, my grandmother used to say that I've always had an old soul.
You do.
And I as a child realized I was always grateful for wherever we were. But I recognized it wasn't ours.
Yeah.
So we stayed with our grandparents before, aunts before. We stayed in Section 8 housing before. We had a lot of different living arrangements. And so I understood that there were children who went to the same place every day when they got off the bus or when they left, school.
Yeah.
And that wasn't my reality.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think I processed at a young age the importance of a home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was
it's
I want us to
crazy
have a house.
How you understand at a very early age, not necessarily a social economic status, but you're very aware that these circumstances that I'm living in right now is not what I want to have when I grow up. Some people have that keen understanding. Some people don't, though, right?
And here's the thing. I had a lot of gratitude for my parents as a young child, and I felt like not only was it the permanency of a place, but it was also me doing something special for them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to give my parents a home because I see them working so hard all the time, like I would see it. And so I was always fixated on making their lives easier and better. So, I would wash dishes so that my mom I was like, Mom, I wash the dishes. I was that child.
Yes.
And so for me, I'm just like, if I get them a house, like that's going to be, so special and powerful. Yeah. And even if I couldn't put words to it, I understood as a child how powerful it was, which is why last year when it happened and I was 38, I understood the power of patience and trusting the process to say, it took 3 decades for a dream to manifest, but it happened.
Yes. And it's so crazy because you say 3 decades, but you're still so young.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you
if
still
you
have
if you
so
say so.
much. But seriously, and you still have so much life ahead of you. I mean, there's plenty of people your age who haven't purchased their first home.
Yeah.
They haven't established themselves as homeowners.
Yeah.
and you've managed to do this for yourself and for your mom, and you continue to show up for the people that you love.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I love about you the most is how you show up for people. Your whole life is philanthropy, even when you're not necessarily giving money. You're always giving your time and your resources in the way. And when you show up so big that it just feels like, you know, there should be cameras. There should be cameras around. But so I appreciate that about you. The second thing I appreciate about you is that you are a true educator.
Yeah.
I think that you never miss an opportunity to share what you know and what you've learned with somebody else, whether it's correction or not. It doesn't, you know, you don't do it in a way that feels harmful. And so I want to talk about your journey to where you are right now. When you graduated, first of all, when you graduated high school, where did you go to school?
The University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana.
And what did you
study?
Irish.
What did I study? That is such a question. And, you know, I'm going to say this in my choice. I actually went to Notre Dame and became a chemistry pre-med major.
Wow.
Did exceptionally well, right? A year and a half into the program, I went on a faith-based retreat. I've always been a huge person of faith, right? And walked away from that retreat and everything that happened while I was there. And I heard the Lord speak to me and say that you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? And I then understood that to be, you need to study what you love and trust me, right? I immediately left the retreat and changed my major. I dropped being a chemistry pre-medical major, which was big because as a first-generation college graduate, and then I had gone to a STEM high school for the last 2 years of my high school education. That was going to be my ticket to mobility in life, was becoming a medical doctor. You know, and I'm like, that's what you're going to do. And you go to this big name school and you're going to make it and you're going to help the family and community, right? I got there, went to that retreat, changed my major to sociology and African American studies with a minor in education. So I literally spent the rest of my time at Notre Dame studying the psychology and the art and science of just people, social movements, inclusion, right? Equity, all of that, in addition to Black studies abroad in the U.S., historic, current day, and then I minored in education. And everything I am doing today is connected to all three spheres.
Oh my gosh.
It is people work, organizational leadership, development, management, coaching, all of that. It is everything about folks of color as well, right? And then it's also education, you know? And so it's just funny how God brings things full circle.
Were you afraid when you came back and you switched your major?
Very afraid. Let me tell you something. One, my parents did not approve. Actually, nearly everyone in my life that I knew
was like, girl, what are you
I was like, what is wrong with you?
through?
And then on top of that, I changed my major and then I decided to become a teacher.
Did you hear God say this audibly, or was it just this feeling in your gut that you were just like, I know that I'm good at this, but this is not what I'm supposed to be doing?
It was the latter. But let me tell you what I did feel that I audibly heard God tell me in high school, my senior year, when I was applying to schools. And one thing is deeply entrenched in scripture, right? But I felt God say, as long as you are abiding in my will, you will never want for anything the rest of your life.
Yep.
And I literally went back to my dorm in high school because I was at a college preparatory boarding academy my junior and senior year in Alabama, and I wrote it down, right? The second thing I heard God say is your life will be all faith.
Yes.
Right? Like everything about your life is going to be all faith centered and driven, right? That's so powerful because I've known to this day, even financially, if I am not where I want to be, it's because of my own disobedience, right? I've known professionally in terms of opportunities, if something is not happening, it's because it's not meant, right? If I have ever tried to add on a service, even in our firm, in our business, and it was something I was not supposed to be doing, it doesn't work or it doesn't last, right? So I've just been hypersensitive to integrating the voice of God into my decision making. And as long as I do that, everything my hand touches will be blessed. And I know that. It's when I'm outside of that, that it does not work or is not meant to work, or it will be forced and it doesn't have the same impact on lives.
Let me tell you something. Being outside of the will of God has to be the scariest place for anybody.
Yes.
And sometimes I think about people who are non-believers.
Yeah. And
what principles they must have to use to navigate life successfully. It's stressful. It's stressful anyways. How long do you stay in a place before you realize that you're outside of the will of God?
That's good. I actually think, number one, for people who don't believe in a higher power, right, but they produce great fruit, it tends to be because they're very values driven, even if it's not for them explicitly religious or faith-based. So their values, their core values or guiding principles may be joy, or it may be altruism, it may be community or justice, right? And so their center of making decisions is based in those principles. And as long as what they're doing is aligning to those principles, then they can experience fruit, whatever that fruit looks like, even if they call that fruit good karma, right? In the faith-based world, what I know to be true, even if they don't necessarily subscribe to a higher power, is that I know those are godly principles. Because God is all about justice and community and joy and all these things, right? So I never try to explicitly, convert or force someone to see it the way I see it. But as a teacher, I know how to be all things to different audiences that I meet. Right? So they can hear my message. Because if you will tap out to my message because you hear me say this, I'm going to deliver it in a way that you can hear it. So I'm going to say values in this space. And in the other space, I'm going to say the fruit of the Spirit.
I love that.
You know what I'm saying? Because it still brings them. And then my life will attract you to my power,
if that is what's meant to be. It's still, you allowing God to show up so that you can speak to his people.
That's emotional intelligence.
How they need to hear it. Absolutely. So personally and professionally, at this point in your life, what are you seeking to accomplish?
Oh, that's a good question. I will start with the personal. At this point in my life, I am so fixated on choosing Krystal, number one, because I've spent so much of my life. I will be 40 next year, and I'm super proud.
Girl.
4 decades old, right?
I love it.
And I have spent so many years of my life, and particularly in my teens, in my 20s, probably in my early 30s, maybe like turning 30 was like the turning point for me, where people pleasing was very important to me. I cared a lot about what people thought about me, cared a lot about whether they liked me, whether they accepted me, whether I got validation from them. And, at 30, I was at an inflection point because, one, I lost my job as a school principal. I was a very high-performing school principal, award-winning educator, and the practices that I led, which were culturally responsive, everything centering DEI, and everything, were not well received. Right? They weren't popular. They made people uncomfortable. And a lot of the choices of how I chose to show up as a leader led to my push out in that role. And when that happened to me, I learned so much about, one, who really has my back, who really supports me.
Yep.
2, what's really important in life. 3, I learned that my job does not define my identity, because so much of just like my own ego was crouched in my job title and my professional accomplishments.
Yes.
And up until that point in my life, I would share things, even when we think about social media presence, to really prove something to people. Like, I'm this good leader, I'm this, and I can do this. You know, that happened in my life, and it humbled me a lot. Yeah. Even though I wasn't deserving of the action per se, I allowed God to do an inner work in me on my healing journey from it, to say, regardless of what occurred to you, what can you take away from this season and moment in your life to allow God to prepare you for what is next? What's next? That was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Yes. Because it reshaped a lot on the inside of me to then propel me forward to an even larger platform for impact on lives, and an even greater ability to be a blessing to my own family, and to elevate to become the woman I was supposed to truly be.
Yes, to all of that. Before we go into what you desire professionally.
Yeah, because I didn't finish.
Let's rewind.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the beginning of your career. Yeah. Because you spoke about being a elementary school principal. Yeah. And being fired for your DEI practices. And so to get to where you want to be professionally, I want to start with where you started professionally. Yeah. And how you even got to the place that you are today.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, you know, I left undergrad and became a teacher. Yes. And nobody was excited about me entering the teaching profession. My mom's like, I can't believe you went to the University of Notre Dame to become a teacher, right?
Right.
Grandmother,
and did you
everybody.
Start in early education?
No. You mean start like
in
my first
elementary
job?
School? Yeah.
Yes, I was a 4th grade teacher.
So I'm sure that they were like, you really went to Notre Dame to become a 4th grade teacher. No shade to 4th grade teachers.
Yeah, right.
But you could have took them talents to Southern University, or you could have took you. Not you starting in pre-med and getting us excited that you was going to be a doctor.
You know, and she's going to be a pediatrician. And I always knew I wanted to support youth. Yeah. Which is why pediatrics was my, fixation. Actually, in another life, if I ever chose a different career, that's what I would be doing. I'd be a pediatrician. Gotcha. But here's the deal. I taught. I loved it. I was super good at it. Yes. Right? Made so many amazing connections with children, families, all the things. That then led me to be tapped to become an instructional leader. Okay. So I was hired to teach other teachers and coach them.
How long did it take you to get to that place?
That's a great question. 3 years.
Wow. How long does it typically take somebody in that profession to get to that place?
I would say at least closer to a decade.
Okay.
To truly be considered like a deep subject matter expert, or in that 5 to 10 year, mode.
This is where they saw, she did have Notre Dame on her, her resume. Okay.
Yeah, you get promoted.
So in 3 years, you get promoted to
an instructional leadership position. Yes. And then that in a short window, I went from being an instructional coach to a special education coordinator to an assistant principal. This is all in my late 20s, right? And then I became a school principal at 28 or 29 years old. So I had a very quick trajectory in the education, arena. And, what's interesting is that it reshaped my thinking about the importance of competency and effectiveness as the criteria for a greater level of impact, right? Because I think I have been traditionally trained to say you need to do this for 8 years and this for 10 years, And in those environments, it was more like, you're a high performer, and what you know how to do, we need you to teach other people how to do that. Yeah. And then we need you to do this and that. So I never had aspirations in the educational space to get into educational leadership at all.
That quick?
No. And Well, at all, period.
Okay.
I was just,
Why?
I was teaching because
You really enjoy teaching that much?
I would have taught longer.
Okay.
I would have taught longer. I would have gone for national board certification as a teacher, which is a highly esteemed credential to have. And then I would have seen where life would have taken me,
Okay.
you know. But I was definitely not with my eyes set on being a school principal.
Gotcha.
Now, when I matriculate to that position,
How old were you?
28.
Okay.
I was almost turning 29 at the time. I actually inherited what was considered a turnaround school. So that means that the school campus, when I took leadership, was academically failing. There were cultural, like student culture and climate issues, like fights, lack of, like safety and stability, just in like the culture, right? Being warm and welcoming and just safe and structured, right? So I was tasked to transform the school as we knew it. And so
That is a huge job
it was
to
a
take
huge
on.
job. It was a huge job to take on. And so
And that's a lot of pressure. And you were 28, 29. Okay.
Yep. And so here's the thing, part of it for me meant finding the right people to get on the bus and make sure they were in the right seats, while at the same time inheriting over 50% of the staff that I did not hire. So, being able to transform and guide a lot of change with people who, some of which don't want you there.
Right.
They didn't choose you. Maybe connected to the old leader, right? Along with people who are like, team you and let's transform and do this work. All of that meant that we were employing practices that school community had not done before, right? So some of the things that were very important for me is like, number one, to racially diversify the staff. I inherited a staff that was predominantly white for a school that was nearly all Black. And the folks of color who worked there were in support positions and school bus driver, and the cafeteria staff, and really in support roles, but weren't necessarily in leadership and a lot of them in core teaching positions. So that was already one strike against me.
Yeah.
Right? Didn't know the 48 laws of power back then as a young 28, 29-year-old. But, in retrospect, I came to understand why I needed to be the one who needed to go.
Yeah.
Right? So racially diversifying the campus, 2, leading practices that were culturally responsive. So like really being huge about plastering on the wall photos of Black children.
Yeah.
We would take photos of the kids and really get like wraps like you see on cars, and we would put them on the walls of the school that had never been done before. So when kids went up the stairwell, they saw themselves, right? Representation. It was taking social justice strips, even to my hometown of Selma, Alabama, so they can meet Congressman John Lewis, rest in peace, right? All of the stuff that I did, including starting conversations at breakfast time with older students of what does it mean to be Black? Let's process what we see happening in the world. That time, Alton Sterling happened in Baton Rouge, Mike Brown. There was a lot happening, and I was unapologetically talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? Which for some staff were like, you're doing too much. You're making us uncomfortable. This has nothing to do with the standards and what we're supposed to be teaching.
You create problems here.
As well as holding people accountable in a way that felt very aggressive. And there were practices that I led was really about, you need to do this, right? With what felt to be more of a heavy hand. And over time, evolved those practices to more of a soft approach once I saw things were more calm and what we needed them to be. In the process of that, you don't make a lot of fans all the time, right? And so what I recognized was that, one, that wasn't a place that was meant for me to thrive in, right? Where I felt valued, seen, heard, and appreciated. So, I actually had not only a dream about departing at a certain point, I felt God tell me it's time for you to go.
Yeah.
I actually disobeyed.
Oh.
So this is why that hyper sense of obedience that I have comes very much from that. Because I was like, I'm going to stay here. I'm here for the kids. No one's going to push me out. All of these antics began to happen. I mean, And I will say this because I think this is the perfect space to share on Curate. This is something I've never publicly shared. I had a staff member create a fictitious email address and write an email that went to the board of directors for this charter management organization and the CEO, accusing me of inappropriately touching children in kindergarten and first grade classes, providing drug substances to middle schoolers, engaging in nepotism practices of how much I paid, or paid, favoritism to certain staff members. And the list goes on. Stuff that Victoria would have killed my entire career.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially claims of pedophilia, right? That was the biggest blow that I ever experienced of like, how and what within your heart and soul would cause you to create such fictitious lies on a person.
Such vicious.
Oh, yeah. Went through that, that ultimately when I asked for an internal tracing, essentially investigation, traced back to a computer of an employee that was one of my staff members.
Oh my God.
That person later had professional consequences, which I, won't even talk about, from HR. But that happened, and a whole bunch of other stuff started to happen that was so extreme that I'm just like, God, what is this, a season of attack? What was going on? And what I realized was, the culmination of that was coming to work, one day and being sat down in a 20-minute conversation and being told you are not the right fit by a white woman and white man who had no connectivity to the communities that we served, in terms of socioeconomic background, financial, background, racial identity, all the things, to a Black woman in educational leadership that shared multiple identities of the children and are moving them towards the type of educational environment that we need and desire, that I wasn't the right fit for our Black children, right? And that...
No, you weren't the right fit for their agenda.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, children. Right? And at the end of the conversation, being told that I had 30 minutes to vacate the premise, to get whatever things that I needed to grab. My husband was called by one of the staff members, and he works at a school, and they were like, if you can get out, early and come over, like now. They told him what was happening. It was very emotionally just disruptive, not just for me, but for our staff,
Okay, so in real life, let's get in the room.
Yeah.
What was your tone when they said that? Were you so defeated that you were just like,
oh no.
Were you like,
I was shocked.
I'm about to flip the thing.
Well, I think I was shocked. I was hurt. I was flabbergasted myself. I'm like, I'm sitting here trying to process like what you're saying.
Yeah.
So like, what are you saying? Right.
Are you a slow processor?
No, not at all. Like, but in my mind, I'm like, there's no way I opened this school. I'm one of the last to leave. We see this noticeable progress with academic increases. We have stability of staff. We have all of these things. The culture is night and day different than what it was before. And you're letting me go. Right. And I'm like, is this even legal? Now, unfortunately, because of our New Orleans educational landscape, it was permissible, though unjust and inequitable, that you can let someone go in an at-will context without any due diligence around them having to, what's the word I'm looking for? Have an appeals process or anything to it or dispute it, It can literally be forfeit.
Well, Krystal, here's the truth. Here's the truth of the matter is that they brought you in there for change. But because you were so young, and even though you were great at your job, I don't believe that they thought that you could actually do it.
No, I was being set up to fail.
And so
that was very clear.
It was very performative for them. But then when change actually started to happen, the change that they said that they wanted, it's interesting how what they said their values were totally not aligned with their behavior.
No, and the change happened the way I wanted it to happen.
Yeah.
And when I think about the way that racism operates, but then also just politics and just corruption, for lack of a better word, because there were even some folks of color that were involved in a co-opting way to what happened. Is the matter.
There were also disciples involved with Jesus being on the cross.
Yes.
And so people are just doing exactly what has to be done.
Because you don't line up.
For you to fulfill.
Yes.
Yes.
And because you don't line up to the way we want you to operate.
Correct.
You got to go.
Correct.
You know? So, I say all that.
But you're not mad at those people no more, are you?
I'm not. At the moment, I was. And it took me a couple of years to get to a point where I can be even in the same room with folks, right? But I have forgiven each and every one of those folks involved. And I moved on with life because I recognize, number one, several of them have struggled in their own life because karma is real. Yeah. Right?
Hate that for y'all.
But two, I've never sought vengeance. Yeah. Because I can't imagine what it feels like to actively participate in the attempt of sabotage to a person to only watch them publicly win and thrive on a whole different level. I'm just like, it has to be hard for you to see things I post.
Could you imagine? I say this all the time. Could you imagine the people that said they used to be friends with Beyonce?
Yeah.
I hate that for them.
Or the boss that told Oprah that she would never have a future in television or anything related to entertainment. Yeah. And she got fired. Yeah. At actually the same age. From a television
But think
station.
about it. Even from that point of view, she could not have reached the people that she was supposed to reach. Yep. She could not have done what she was truly called to do had she stayed in that safe space.
That's right.
Same for you. Yeah. You could not. I mean, because, hello, we're here.
I know.
And and this alone is just a small piece of such an impactful body of work that you have done. And so you were fired and then now you have moved on. You started K. Allen Consulting. How did you do that?
So 6 months after all that happened, because I sat for 6 months. I did. I kind of took what was not truly a sabbatical, but my grandmother in particular was like, don't just go apply for another job. Just sit and God will provide. Right. And in that time, I started to do trainings for folks in the education space because, one thing about the quality of work, and I always tell people this, especially folks who are interested in becoming a consultant or doing anything service-based, your work has to speak for you. Yeah. Right? It's not just that you want to be a consultant or you want to be X and then you just wake up and do it and you're successful. I was able to begin consulting because I was a highly effective educator already with receipts. Yes. Right? So it was easier for people to trust what I had to share because I had receipts and evidence to back up what I'm advising, what I'm coaching you on. Yes. I can tell you how to transform a school culture because I transformed one. Right? And also from studying these things, like being in leadership programs, formal studies in college, all this stuff. Right? And so for me, 6 months later, I founded K. Allen Consulting, which was January of 2017. And so January of 2024 of this year made the 7-year mark. And 7 is such a special number, we know, for so many reasons. 7 years also to the date that I was let go of. This book, which is a national best-selling text now, was actually put on shelves. Yes. And so I believe in the way that God brings things full circle, right? But I think all of that happened on the heels of me surrendering to a healing process. Yeah. Like we will all be hurt, disappointed, experience setbacks at one point in our life. That's just going to happen. The question is, what do you do with it? Yeah. And do you allow yourself to process lessons not only about people, but here was a powerful thing for me. Process lessons for yourself doing mirror work. Right? So as much as things happen to me, the most powerful thing I could have also owned was where, Krystal, could you have operated differently as a leader yourself? That doesn't mean that the way you operated deserved termination, but it does mean in order for you to go into this next season of life, there's some stuff that God needs to do on the inside of you to make you prepared for your next assignment, right? And so my ability to become highly reflective, holding myself accountable to just me has been the most transformative thing ever. Like if I am doing too much, I know when I'm doing too much and I know how to fall back. When I am rushing, I can sit with it and say, but why are you moving with urgency like that? And you don't need to be. What is it about your lack of trust, perhaps even in God in this moment, that you feel like you need to go manipulate stuff when he told you to be still, right? So it's like there's a different level of dialogue that happens on the inside of me now that wasn't happening in my late 20s as an early professional.
So even when you started this process, even when you started this business, it's K. Allen Consulting, I'm sure you have encountered people and entities that maybe trusted you, but also were discounting the trajectory of where your career has already gone.
Absolutely. Several.
And so 7 years is such a small time, but it's such a long time in business.
It is.
And so as you grow and as you continue to build and scale your company, what is it like to encounter people who were with you when you started that are still in that same space?
Oh, that's so good.
What does that feel like for you?
That's good. You know, it has felt initially uncomfortable. Ultimately, it has felt peaceful because it's something I've learned how to make peace with. And I'll tell you why.
Maybe in like a guilty way, like, dang, we really did start this together. Do you feel like you left people behind? Do you feel like people have left themselves behind? Like,
yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'll tell you the source of initially the discomfort, right? I think like I came to recognize that not everyone in my face was in my corner.
That's a harsh reality.
It is, right? And so what I realized in the transition, you know, it's different when you start an initiative and people are like, oh, that's what she's doing now, right? Versus you get to a certain point where it's like, oh, this is like legit. And it's like growing still to a level in which my time, my voice, my power, and I don't mean power but like positional title. I mean influence and all these things are actually very different than what they were before. And that's how you knew me before, right? It's like...
And it's hard for people to watch that
It's hard for some folks.
and accept it.
That part. The part where you just said acceptance, right? Yeah. So there are folks that I realize choose to not accept who I am in this moment of who God has made me to be because their comfort is in who I used to be. Yeah. Right? And so because there's a lack of wanting to embrace that, they may privately communicate. They don't publicly engage and affiliate with you, right? Yeah. Or they may say certain things to you, but they talk about you behind your back, whether it's in text or whether it's in person with other people. And I'm the type of person, I'm hyper aware of everything and people will never know. So they may think she doesn't know these things. I know all of it. But I still treat people with love. Right. But I've learned how to not overextend myself for people that would never do that for me and don't, right? I think a second thing that I had to grapple with was that when you watch my journey and you especially know my roots and you're not happy for me, also because I do a lot of good for others and you don't want good for me, I really have to distance myself from frequent interactions and touch points with you because it's insane that you don't want that for me and you know that I deserve it, right? Yeah. I think the old me and people-pleasing spirit would have been like, I still feel obliged to this relationship because we've known each other for 15 years or 16 years. We grew up together. Or
what about the people who actually helped you to get to the space where you are, but they couldn't get to the space where you are?
Well, that's an interesting one for me because I bootstrapped our company, right? So I didn't have a business coach in the beginning. I didn't have people email me templates to help me do anything. I didn't have people. Because
you don't want to hear emailing templates
to people. Seriously. That's the whole reason why I started in the pandemic, the Catalyst program, because I said, I literally email people and would text people and ask them for help or meetings. No response, right? Now, some of those same people, once I blew up, would want to, let's have coffee and I'm so proud of you, congratulations. But when I say no one coached me, I'm looking at no one coached me to be a consultant, to start a business and to grow it. Nobody.
Despite your ask for help.
Despite the ask for help for people that I felt were in position to be able to help me.
Yeah.
Even if it was for a contract, it would be for a meeting, especially in our ecosystem, in our local ecosystem, right? To say, hey, can I sit down and talk to you about what it is that I do so that, I can have some type of contract opportunity. I didn't get those opportunities.
I think it's amazing how...
It was a groupie. It was a bandwagon thing. Once I blew up, then people want to work with you.
Yeah. But I also think it's amazing how you didn't receive that help. And now anybody who knows you, anybody who works with you, they still get to experience that kind, open person that you are, this generous person that you are. Why do you still show up for people like that?
I do that because that's what I want. I wanted to be seen and heard in terms of the acts for help. And because I know what it's like to not be helped, it's the reason why I help people. Because I don't want people to feel what I felt. It was isolating. And at the same time, it was my motivation. And it's why, at this point, I'm quick to check anybody if they try to, co-opt having some type of ownership of how this thing was built. Because I'm like, I built this thing. Let's be clear. And when they come into it, I think where KC is today, we have a team, right? A team of people that I value, I love, and I respect. And at the same time, I never allow anyone to take credit for the fact that KC was built on the backs of a single Black woman.
Yes.
Because I think it's easy for people, especially where KC is now, to look and say, well, it's easy for you to do that because you have a team. I actually got mega contracts, including Amazon and Google and Apple and all that, without a team. So when I built a team, I brought a team into an already established entity of respect in the ecosystem of the work that I do to then help scale and grow the work, go further and do more of the work. But the team didn't build the work, if that makes sense, right? And I think from a racial standpoint, a gender standpoint, class, all of that, I think that is very important because historically, society doesn't have issues telling the story of Walt Disney. Right? Or Sam Walton and building Walmart or the McDonald brothers for McDonald's. But put respect on my name for building what K Allen Consulting is because we are not taking the credit from white men or people to say you didn't build JP Morgan Chase. Right? So the amount of no's I got for opportunities, the late nights of losing sleep, trying to grind, hustle, make content, flipping over backwards to meet criteria that people who didn't look like me didn't even have to meet, building my own website, maintaining my own website. my whole entire social media platform.
Doing
I have done it on my own.
Doing 50-11 jobs.
Yes, for real. Marketing,
balance this thing out.
branding. Yeah, people
So-
ask me, who made your IG page?
You did. Yeah.
Who keeps it up?
I think also people may listen to this and think like, how did you get in the doors of Google and Amazon and Apple? And so I have been very blessed to sit in the workshop that you did for Curate alone. Really kind of solidified to me that like, oh, she's not playing about this.
Yeah.
This is not a template that she
Yeah.
got from anybody. Because I've
No,
never heard
yeah.
DEI explained in the way that you did. And
Yeah.
so I would be very remiss and irresponsible if I did not give you the space
Yeah.
to really talk about truly what is DEI.
Yeah.
And why is this everybody's job?
Yeah.
And how is this bigger than race alone?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Number one, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been the center of just what I've cared about my whole entire life. Even before it was coined that, right?
Yeah.
Like the questions I would ask, what I chose to study and major in, the things that I did, like I led a protest at the University of Notre Dame in 2019 when the university fired its Black first head coach, right? And did that alongside classmates. So I wasn't like the only person, right? But being willing to get in good trouble and call out practices that were sexist, racist, all the things, that is literally who I have been my entire life, right? This just puts a current name to what the work is,
Yes.
right? And for me, it's important that folks understand, you know, diversity is any form of representation, whether you are talking about gender, race, religious background, neurodiversity, body size, personality type, all those are types of diversity, right? And it's important then when we talk about the D in DEI, that all of us stay mindful of what is your identity and what are your needs, right? But also, what are other forms of identity and diversity that you are not mindful of, that you could perpetuate some type of offense or harm or inequity within, right? So therefore, those are areas that you should be more intentional about, right? So for instance, you know, there are terms that we use all the time that people may not recognize. Saying that could be offensive to a community, right? I'm, for instance, especially coming from a lower socioeconomic background, very sensitive when I tell people that I grew up and had very humble beginnings. I call out financial poverty, but not poverty in values, principles, love, all of that, because people tend to say, if you're from a low income background, that means they just think deficit about everything. You don't come with anything. What value do you add? And I'm like, let's actually check the biases we have with that,
Right.
that are so loaded. Even when we think about the makeup of people's households, like there are single parent households that are more healthy and emotionally healthy and mentally than some two parent homes where a kid is witnessing physical abuse to a parent, emotional and verbal abuse. So let's not assume that just because there are two people here versus one is automatically the better environment for the child, right? There's so much we have to unpack. So there are some things that we say, for instance, they come from a good household. What do you mean by good? And good by whose definition? Is it good because there are two folks there?
Right.
And then if it's one parent, it's a bad household. You know what I'm saying? So I give that example to say that it calls out the importance of language
Yeah.
in our thinking. So when we talk about identity and diversity, we have to be very mindful of the stories we are telling ourselves about different types of people, right? The assumptions we're making that sometimes are inaccurate and not well informed. And therefore, what we need to do to make sure that we're doing right by all types of communities, right? When we talk about inclusion, we're talking about the extent to which people feel seen, valued, heard, and appreciated, and so much more, fairly treated, respected. Inclusion is all about the quality of experiences that folks are having. And so we got to really say, for instance, if you're in a company, you don't have many women, and y'all start hiring a bunch of women, You can't just say we're inclusive of women just because we have a lot more than what we used to. No, you're more gender diverse because you got more women there, but it doesn't mean that it's automatically inclusive of women, because now I need to examine how often are you cutting off women when they speak, but you don't do it to your male counterparts. How often are you calling them sweetie, honey, babe? How often are they feeling like they can't even let you know when they're pregnant because it might impact their ability to be promoted to be a vice president? They got to hide that, right? Or hide their aspirations towards motherhood. That's sexist. You know, how often are they considered to be too emotional and soft to lead?
Yeah.
There are all types of stuff that happens by which women are in a space, but it's not necessarily always the best set of conditions for them as women, right? And so with inclusion, we got to be thinking of who is well and who is not, who has what they need and who does not. And we got to be able, as a society, and Victoria, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, especially in leaders, aren't ready to sit with the cognitive dissonance that two things can be true at the same time. Krystal can be having a wonderful experience in this organization, let's say this nonprofit, and Victoria could be having a horrible experience. And both of those can be true. And let's say I'm not a mom, and people who work for you who are not parents have a different experience of the organization than moms and parents, right? One prime example is happy hour. Every time we have a social outing as a staff, if in this nonprofit, it's always at 4:00, it's always during this happy hour time. One, everyone doesn't drink. Two, some people got to go pick their kids up. That me as a single person, right? I don't have that to think about because I don't have any responsibility outside of just myself, right? So it can feel alienating for those that are parents, right? Because they're like, well, I can't really participate and fraternize the way that my other colleagues can because of my identity as a parent. So I always tell people when we talk about inclusion is not just about do people of color feel accepted in a sense of belonging. It's actually a lot of folks. What about the older people who are working that we have generational and age bias towards, right? Because I'm Gen Z or I'm a millennial and I think people who are 50 or older or this, and we don't include them in the right way in the workplace culture. Or it can be the other way around. It's an older culture. You have younger staff and they don't quite feel like they fit in because you're not making it a welcoming experience for them. There's so many layers of who we can be more inclusive to, right? I can go on and on about it, but those are just two examples. I can listen
to you go on and on about it. I think what you're doing is you're walking into these companies in these huge entities and you are tearing down what they say they uphold as their values. But their practices are not
aligned.
They're not mirroring that. And so how does it feel for you to be so aligned with something that is clearly way bigger than you?
It's ministry.
You won't even be alive to see the real fruit of your labor. How does that feel?
It feels dynamic. Right? And it feels fulfilling because one of my mentors, who I've never met because he passed way before I was alive, is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who I was born on his actual birthday. And when I think about his work on the ground in the civil rights movement in my hometown, my grandmother always told me years ago that, you're called to do some big things in this life. And she said, I don't know what they're going to be, but you're going to do some big stuff, right? And this might creep some people out to hear this, but when you actually listen to the words of King's last sermon, right, which he was talking about, I feel that I'm headed to the mountaintop and I may not be with you to see it all the way through. There's just so much in his sermon that he wrote and spoke that for me, I know that he knew that his purpose was bridging and leading this huge movement, but he knew that he was coming towards the end of his assignment.
Yeah. It's kind of like how God allowed Moses to actually see the promised land.
Yeah.
But you can't, he wasn't allowed to go there.
Yes,
but it didn't stop with him.
It didn't stop with him, right?
And so when you think about even people who build cathedrals and how the person who thought of this, when they started building it, they will never see the end.
The full
of this.
end.
Even the people who come right after them, they won't see the actual cathedral come together.
Yeah. And that's how I feel about like your question in the work, right? I feel that my life is to be one of being a vessel.
Yes.
Right? I feel like I'm called to be a vessel for social good. And there are some things I am seeing already. Like there's a hospital we work with. When you walk in the hospital, everything from the elevator, where to go, to radiology and everything is now in 3 different languages to be inclusive linguistically of all the patients they predominantly serve. That happened on the side of us doing a diversity, equity, inclusion set of trainings and an audit with them, right? So there's some like real examples of where I see in the world. And Victoria, I'm not even gonna lie to you. And this is why I have become mute to naysayers, right? Or we would say haters. I rest good at night knowing that there are people in the world experiencing better patient care or different X, Y, and Z as a result of the work that I'm doing every day. You don't have to be a fan of it, but I know the impact and I know the receipts are real, right? And for me, that is enriching to what I know God called me to do, which is why even though I consult and I'm not a formal minister, right? The consulting work is my ministry.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Now, what I do know is that you will live to see yourself be named one of the most influential women in the world. I know that sounds like I'm joking, but I'm pretty sure somebody said that to Oprah, and she legit is one of the most influential. And this is probably, somebody probably thought this of her when that woman told her that she would not be successful on TV.
Yeah.
And so I know that you know the power that you hold, and I think that is beautiful. And I think that a lot of times, oftentimes, women can do amazing things.
Yeah.
They can touch so many lives and change so many lives, and we still struggle to know our power.
Yeah.
And so it is very inspiring to know you and to witness the work that you're doing and witness the lives that is changing. Because you certainly don't get to do life with people like that often.
Thank you.
And so I know we've been talking for a while, so I'm gonna wrap this up with 3 more things.
Okay.
I'm gonna be real honest about. I'm not gonna be like your pastor that be like, I got one more thing.
I got one more thing. We having 7.
Right. No, I got 3 more things. So one, with you being so multi-faceted, right? You are caring for your parents. You are, and not necessarily, you don't have like elderly old sick parents.
But just family in general.
But you're taking a load off of your family in every way. You're also a wife.
Yes.
You are also a business owner who now have a team of people that you are responsible for. Your social life, your friends,
civic responsibility,
your
boards.
civic responsibility, the boards that you are on. How do you manage that and keep your mind in a healthy, sane place?
That's a great question.
Is your mind always in a healthy, sane place?
Sometimes I want to snap and click out on people. I wanted to say that because we were taping. I was like, someone's going to laugh at that. But no, I seriously, like, number one, I have learned to find the synergy and cohesion in my commitments, right? So, for instance, there are some organizations or things that I have attached myself to, right? That in retrospect, I'm like, ooh, girl, it's time for you to make that transition because that's not aligned to what you're doing. Like, you don't have enough time for it, or the mental capacity for it. So I'll step down, you know, from organizations if I ever needed to, especially if it's like board service. If I don't have the capacity, I'm very honest about that, right?
Yeah.
Or if I just can't do something, I just don't sign up to do it, you know? So everything I'm doing, I have the capacity to do,
Right.
you know, but I will say that I create boundaries in a way that I have never done before in my life. That is a part of my sanity. So at a certain point, like when I come home, I don't take calls after I get home. I'm not going to be on somebody's Zoom after a certain point. Like I'm home. This is like my haven, my safe space, my oasis, and I need to like completely unplug.
Yeah.
Which has some side effects, right? So like I could at any given moment, I won't show the camera, but I have 93 text messages, no exaggeration to that number, sitting on my phone because I am making a choice to not exert my energy responding in detail to text messages to people. Now, the flip side of that is like when I know people are like really assigned to my life for us to be in some type of covenant, friendship, relationship, etc., they actually understand. They're like, Krystal is probably overwhelmed. She got a lot of stuff on her plate. And they give me grace, which I love, because they know when she has the capacity to sit and like fully engage, she will.
Yeah.
But if I'm not hearing from her, it's because she's not able to, right? I need that. I appreciate that so much.
And you also can't just pop up at your door.
Yes, right. So that part, right? So I'm very much I unplug. Like unplugging is like huge for me. Two, I don't engage with like clapbacks and trying to like set people straight and trying to prove things. I've learned a lot watching Beyonce over the years, for instance.
Ciao.
And she does not respond
Look around,
to
everybody
people.
on mute.
Yeah, like she just operates as who she is and she keeps it moving and she just zones all of it out. And I really learned, and I'm super proud of myself, I've learned to, when there are distractions, to just let them be. I don't try to correct people anymore. I don't try to correct a rumor if it's inaccurate, whatever. I just live and show up because I realize if you're meant for us to work together or to be in connection with one another, God is going to allow it to happen. And so this is what's happened. I've met people before, straight up, who I don't know them from a hill on the moon, right? And they're like, you inspire and motivate me. And I'm like, thank God, because I'm showing up in a way that speaks to them. Conversely, there's some people I met who are like, I wasn't really a big fan of yours. And I'm so glad.
That will actually say that to your face.
Yeah, they've actually told me that before. And, you know, they're like, but I never met you. And I know we haven't worked together, but it was just, and I'm like, what? In my mind, I'm listening like, okay, where you going with this? They end in saying, well, they end in saying, I'm so glad I got to be in an actual session with you.
I'm like,
or to meet you in person or to talk to you, whatever experience they have. Yeah. They're like, you are absolutely amazing. And so what I realized, that has more to do with them than it does with me. Yeah. That I make you feel a way and you don't even know me.
You could totally build a whole workshop just on that alone.
Oh, yeah. But the old me would have tried to, it's like I'm trying to make you see me, like me, whatever. And now, you know, it's Curate, so I'm going to keep it clean. I give 0 hugs to those comments.
Oh, gotcha. Oh.
So I'm like, okay. And then I just move to the next thing, right? Because I realize it won't stop what God has in operation and in motion, right?
Your reaction, though, could.
Yes, if I get out of,
it in a way that's so not edifying. But it's so easy to answer naysayers more than it is for people who are celebrating
That's right.
There should be a study on that. I'm sure
there should be a study on that. Oh, can I add one more thing?
Yes.
I have fun as well.
Yes.
And I don't publicize my fun all the time, but I just
what does fun look like for you?
Well, that's a great question. So one, I like to dance. I like the outdoors. I love to eat. I love to go to new places. I love to watch movies. I just love
When
to
I
just
hear you
be.
say dance, it looks very classy, but you are from New Orleans. It's, I mean,
I'm
so
from
you are in New
Alabama.
Orleans.
Yes.
Worse. From Alabama.
Like dance, girl, dance. I love to move. I love movement and joy and laughter and all of that. And I do all of it. It's like medicine
Yes.
to me.
No,
I
kidding, I love
live a very good life choosing myself and what fills my cup up. Even if people don't see me doing those things. People that know, they know. They're like, oh, Krystal food. Krystal.
I feel like you get to live the life you love because
do.
you continue to choose to walk in obedience.
Amen.
And you're consistent.
That's right.
And I think that God blesses those two things for sure.
I think so too.
You ready for my next question?
I'm ready.
Okay. So little Krystal,
Little Krystal.
what are you telling her now?
Oh, are you trying to make me cry?
But I do love to
This
see
is
people cry.
This is the type of question that will like get me there,
I do
Victoria.
love to see.
Yes.
What are you telling her now? What is she telling you?
Yeah. I told you I was going to cry. So I am telling her that, one, you are so beautiful.
Oh.
And beautiful just the way you are. I am telling her that everything about you is your superpower. You don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to be ashamed of it, embarrassed of it. My adult self is telling her that the things that you used to want to hide are the things that made you become great.
That's good.
You know? And I think I would tell her that God, no matter what you go through in life, will always be with you.
Yeah.
He always has.
Yeah.
See, I told you.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I don't have tissue.
No, it's okay.
Here, rip a
you're
page out your
fine.
book. I'm
I
just
was like,
kidding.
ah. Yeah, but no, it's fine. It's
Now,
fine.
what is she telling you?
Ooh, she is telling me that, that's such a good one. My younger self is telling my older self to never let go of your inner child. Right?
That's good.
Because the heavier your responsibilities become adulting, right? Everything can become serious.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And heavy. And I will say 2 years ago, so definitely pandemic time, was the moment in which I realized you gotta start choosing you.
Yeah.
Right? And choosing me also meant choosing my joy, prioritizing my joy, my wellness, all the things. And so I'm really glad I began to listen to my inner child. Yes. So I do the things that make me happy, whether that is going to like a cartoon movie at the theater, or, I mean, I was with, I have some little kids that are connected to my life. And they are like, I'm kind of like their auntie,
Yeah, you're that rich
godmama,
auntie,
just
girl.
what, girl, for real. That's what
When you
they're
took
like.
your whole family to the movies and like they came here and you had a party bus and y'all went to go see what was it, Black Panther?
Yeah.
That was so
Saints,
beautiful.
I mean, not Saints, but Pelicans game, all kinds. They'll be doing all kinds of
Yes,
stuff, all
I
kind of
love
stuff.
it.
But I will say this: I do whatever makes me feel good, and I talk to my inner child in terms of insecurities that were developed when I was a child. And I think that has been very healing for me to affirm, with certain statements, what is the actual truth.
Yeah.
Versus whatever I thought as a kid or whatever I was, insecure about as a child,
I want you to inspire a woman or a young girl who is watching your journey from afar and it seems impossible for them to do what you're doing?
Yeah. Number one, just don't cry during your interview because your makeup will start to mess up. But, you know, I would say, one, to bet on yourself. Be willing to believe in the merit, the genius, skill sets, the value that you bring to the table. That might look like applying for that job you really, really want, right? That may be starting a business, going to get your LLC. That may be traveling abroad solo because you really want to become a world traveler, right? But definitely believe in yourself and go for it, even when you're scared, right? Two, I think you have to trust the process and give it enough time of consistently becoming a student of your craft, whatever your craft is, whether that is you in an employment context or whether that's you as an entrepreneur. You have to be so just like laser focused on being the best version of what it is that you feel called to do. So don't just consult just to consult. Try to be the coldest and the baddest at what you do, right? And that's not from an ego standpoint. That is from a standpoint of recognizing that your work has the ability to set people free, to impact and change their lives. And if you are lackluster in doing it, or if you're mediocre in doing it, or if you don't do it well, you are contributing to malpractice in your industry. And you are setting organizations and people up to not dismantle systems of oppression, right? To not transform communities and people's quality of life. So the better you are at what you do, the better you are able to help others. And when they are helped, then communities in the whole world changes. Even if it's photography, right? Don't just take pictures to take pictures. Take pictures that tell a story, that change a narrative, that change the world. I was gonna say it's right there, and he went all the way around. I was like, it's right there, it's right there. Oh, this is so good. Such a good, great conversation.
Yes.
Yeah,
We did it.
we did it.
Thank you so much.
You were so welcome.
Thank y'all so much for joining us. I told y'all you were in for a treat. Thank you, Krystal, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for joining us.
Yeah.
If you have any questions for Krystal, or if you would like to follow her and keep up with her journey in K. Allen Consulting, I will put all of her information in the bio.
Yeah.
And you can follow her from there.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.